in the state itself, they have 2 different time zones?
Yes, yes. And that, I think that's why my phone keeps going like back and forth, because
Yeah,
I think it's
so weird.
reading it and thinking I'm in EST, and then for some reason sometimes thinking I'm in CST. It's in this weird like bubble area. So anyway, I finally figured out what time it was.
Oh wow. See, Indiana has partially the East Coast, partially. Wow. Central.
Yes.
That is weird.
Yes, it is.
That is weird. Okay. But you're on. You're on, even though you're not whatever, you're on vacation, but you still made it to the class.
Yes, of course.
Very special, very special, very special. And Christelle made it, and Jenny made it, and hopefully other people are also making it. I don't think it's because they were confused by your messages. I think it's just, Dixie's on. Hi, Dixie.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, glad you made it.
Me too. It's been hectic as usual.
Life has a tendency to do that to us. Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so we are, all right, starting now. We are going to start a new concept, which is actually very appropriate. I'm trying to get my hand in the right place. A new concept, which is very appropriate because we started the Jewish month of Adar, and Adar is really a month of joy. And this year it is a Jewish leap year. Now, in the secular calendar, a leap year means February gets like an extra day or something. And in the lunar Jewish calendar, a leap year means you get an extra month. You get an extra 30 days. So this year is a leap year, and we get an extra 30 days of Adar. We get 2 Adars instead of 1. So that means if Adar is the idea of joy, this year we have 60 days of joy, not 30 days of joy, but 60 days of joy. And 60 has a very strong spiritual energy, as there's a concept that if you have 60 times the amount of something, it nullifies, it takes away the other energy. So if we have 60 qualities of joy, 60 days of joy, 60 qualities of joy, that should negate any negative energies. So it's a really good time to talk about joy. And of course, what we need is an internalized, an inner joy, which sometimes just requires putting things in perspective. You can get thrown by details, little details, big details, and maybe our general picture is excellent, but we're not thinking about the general picture. And maybe that's not 100% excellent, but it's on the road to excellent, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. And whatever's not excellent, I'm earning by my trust that it is going to be revealed as excellent. So sometimes what we need to do to create that joy is really understand that our life is good. That our life is good, and that we have to really just breathe in all the good in our life, breathe in all the good in our life, realize our life is good, realize our life is good. And that is a very strong tool to dispel any negative energy. So sometimes, but you're like, no, I have some not good stuff in my life. It's good to literally like put it on paper. Like all the blessings, all the good, and the current challenges. And just look at the list and look at both sides. And then it's like, oh, those challenges exist and they're challenges. But I look at all that good, and that's an overwhelming amount. And it just sometimes put things in perspective. Did anyone ever try that? Like to literally put on paper the 2 sides of their life, all the blessings and all the challenges? Anyone here ever done that for themselves? I guess not, which could mean like you never You never even wondered. You know your life is good. You don't have to write it down on paper to realize it. But sometimes if a person gets thrown, it's a good thing to remember to do. It's a good thing sometimes to literally, I've seen Lubavitcher has given this advice to some people, literally write it on paper. Literally see the good, the blessings, the challenges, to literally see like percentages, perspectives, what's really the totality of your life. So even if there are challenges, it doesn't take away that you have a very blessed life. I think when to really realize we have a blessed life, we have to focus on it. We have to focus on the details. We have to focus on God's kindnesses, on God's blessings, on God's miracles. To put myself in this grateful, blessed vision of my life. So what I'd like to do to get us started is I'd like right now everyone to think of 5 blessings they have in their life. And then when you have 5, raise your virtual hand so I'll know you got 5. I'll raise my real hand. If you unmask yourself, you could also raise your real hand instead.
Oh. I don't know how to do it.
You raise your hand by hitting reactions. On the bottom of your screen, it should say reactions, and then you could select it. Ah, you did it, Dixie.
You see, it isn't motive case. Like I said. Colin,
We were thinking of 5 blessings in our life. And when you think of 5 blessings in your life, you raise your virtual hand. That's your symbol that you came up with 5 blessings in your life.
We need not point out to you, Mr. Mason, testimony of this witness is very accurate. That depends upon the point of view. Give it to the court. There are 1 or 2 questions I'm invited to ask the medical.
Okay, now everyone put down their hands. Put down your virtual hands.
Plan.
Put down your virtual hands. And after you put down your virtual hands, I want everyone to think of 5 more blessings. You cannot use the same 5 you just used. 5 more blessings. You can think of aspects of the 5 that you weren't considering, but you can't repeat what you said before. 5 more blessings. And when you think of 5 more blessings, raise again your virtual hand, or you can raise your real hand if we can see you.
Cyanide is a white crystalline substance, something like crystallized sugar. When it's perfectly dry, it has moist air and solution. It has the strong, bitter smell of prussic acid. And how much cyanide would be the legal? About 1,500 grams. They thrust into the mouth. Rather dangerous. There'd be an immediate burning.
When you think of 5 more blessings, raise your virtual or real hand.
In which case, of course, that will consume minutes. Thank you, Doctor. That'll be all. Your Honor. Again, within permission, I would like to privilege recalling two other.
Who's it? Oh, well, find the virtual thing. I can't do it.
You could raise your real hand, Dixie, because we see your face, or on the bottom of your screen, it should say reactions.
Can't find it.
Can't find it. You can just raise your real hand. Okay, we see it.
Okay.
We see it. Okay, put your hands down. Put your virtual hands down.
I'd like to recall Ms. Hope Sutherland.
Okay, everyone has to put down their virtual hands. I want you to think of 5 more things that you didn't think of in your first 10. Not the first 5 and not the second 5. 5 more things. They could be aspects of any of the other things, if those were very broad strokes. And then there's many aspects that you're grateful for, you see as blessings in your life. But 5 more things, and then raise your hand.
Easy. Okay.
Step down. Would you stand right there? Management. Is this part of your new information? Yes, it is. Yes. Your Honor, I would like to recall Miss Leona Durant. Miss Leona Durant, stand, please.
Raise your real or virtual hand when you come up with 5 more things. I see you, Dixie. I see you, Sally. All right, look how we were able to achieve that in minutes. No great deep introspection to come up with 5 blessings and 5 more blessings and 5 more blessings. And we could come up with more, and we could come up with more, and we could come up with more. We are so blessed that on the spot, you can come up with so many blessings in your life. And it is such a wonderful exercise to just really tangibly recognize that you have a very, very, very blessed life. And I think when we're losing the joy under stress, under worry, under fear, under tension, under all the stuff that happens to us in this world, it's just so getting back to that inner core. Breathe deeply, and breathe in and think of your blessings, and expel out the negativity, the fear, the worry, the pressures, and breathe the unhappiness. Breathe in more thoughts of your blessings, and breathe out that unhappiness, that loneliness, that downness, that negativity. And just keep doing it until you really feel, you don't just tell yourself, you feel, I have a very blessed life. I have a truly blessed life. And when you really get that you have a truly blessed life, you have joy. It's your straightest, easiest road to joy, is recognizing how blessed your existence really is. Now, sometimes, of course, things happen in our life, though, that seem like a little challenging to process our life as good, even though we have many blessings. But that doesn't take away that sometimes there's things going on that seem very not good, and they're going on to us. And obviously, if it's going on to someone else, we have a very different perspective, because if anybody else outside of ourselves is suffering, then we know that we're supposed to turn to God and complain to God and ask God, like, what's going on? And we don't understand it, and we're not supposed to understand it, because we understood it, we couldn't complain. So deliberately, God makes it that we don't understand it, so we can freely complain, which is what he wants us to do, about someone else's suffering, about what's going on in someone else's life. But in our own life, when we're talking about ourselves, we are supposed to accept everything that happens as an aspect of God's enormous love for me. So no matter what it is, and no matter how inexplicable it is, it's coming from God. And I know he loves me. And therefore, I know this is part of his love. So what you have to really get very, very strong to maintain this joy is the absolute awareness, rock solid, that everything that happens is God. The smallest detail of life is God. Things that seemingly most random thing is God. Natural occurrences is God. Politics is God. Everything is God. The economy is God. Everything is God. The smallest blade of grass is God. The movement of a planet is God. Everything is God. Why does he care? He cares. Why does he bother? He bothers. Nothing is on automatic pilot. Nothing is just nature. God put nature. No. As we discussed last week, the seed germinating, that's God causing that specific seed to sprout and that specific seed to not. That's all God. So that is one thing I have to have so strong in me, and I have to think it again and again and again and again. And I know it's come up. Now we're talking about joy and it's coming up. We're talking about trust and it was coming up. We're talking about not worshiping idols and it was coming up, because obviously this is a foundation of so many different perspectives. So all these different perspectives are really one perspective. It's all God. And the second thing I have to have as equally rock solid inside of me is, and he loves me absolutely. And he loves me unconditionally. And if I know it's all him, and I know he has absolute love for me, then whatever I'm going through is part of that love. So when we're counting our blessings and we came up with 5, and then we came up with another 5, then we came up with another 5, those are the things I process as good in my life. And we could have kept going, and I could have kept coming up with more things and more things and more things, because my mind is very muscled in this direction, because I do this very often. I appreciate the blessings, both as an expression to God that I'm grateful for the blessings, as opening up the channels for more blessings to flow, and to center me and recognize that I have a very blessed life. So I'm constantly in a space of joy and energy and enthusiasm, instead of being like under the burden. I don't want to be under. I want to be happening, energized, joyous. So from my perspective as a human being, when I'm thinking of all my blessings, that's what makes me feel so secure and confident in my life and so joyous. When I think of my challenges, they don't do the exact same thing for me. But we at the same time have to discuss our challenges if we're talking about joy, because how do you have joy when you have all this other stuff? Fine, you made a list of 15 blessings, of 20 blessings, of 30 blessings, of 50 blessings. But what about that? That one thing, doesn't that like overwhelm everything? That is also God's embrace. I'm human. I'm not putting it on my list because I don't get how it's the embrace. But I'm not letting that disturb the reality of my blessed life, because it's God and he loves me. That's also part of his love. Sometimes we merit to see it quickly. Sometimes we merit to see it eventually. And sometimes we merit to never see it. Depends what the road is, what God wants from us. But it's only God, and he only has love for us. And that's part of the love. So maybe we can try to do this. Let's all try to think of something that we have experienced in the past or we are currently experiencing that was or is painful to us, and try to wrap our mind around it, try to envision it like enveloped in whatever your vision is, however you're translating that in your mind's eye of God's love, God's infinite, inexplicable wisdom, and God's infinite love. And like envision it, hold it in your mind, hold it in your heart, that thing, that painful past or present thing, but wrapped, that you can see it, strands and strands and strands of God's love. And let's just all try to have like a minute of that vision, that personal vision of whatever's that personal pain that you're envisioning wrapped up in God's love. Who was able to do that? Who was able to take something and really, really envelop it in God's love, in all of its details, really to feel God's love? Now, it's a bit easier to think of your blessings than to do that. It is. Of course, some people would say it's challenging to come up with 15 blessings, but I don't think so. I think we all have very blessed lives, and I think we could come up with blessings. But to
I
really
can
go
think of
into
a
a
lot.
place of pain, Dixie,
I can go into a place of pain real easy, but I can also get peace and comfort and feel God's love coming through me, but also because Jack is right here and I can feel his presence. I can draw his energy from the grave, the resting place. I'm so blessed that I'm not like other people and have to go to a cemetery. The blessing and the peace is his love. The pain is still there, but the love is there too.
so Dixie, when you were taking that pain and wrapping it up, really, really wrapping it in God's love, did that in any way lessen the pain?
No.
No, the pain doesn't get less. You feel it, you feel God's love, and you feel the pain. Did anyone feel that the pain lessened even a little bit as they were seeing it through the layers of God's love? Maybe not. I mean, it's possible that nobody felt it. I have done this exercise before for myself with something, so maybe it's easier for me to go into that space and to really feel, but it did feel very powerful now in the class, because obviously there's the energy of the group that's making each one of our own introspections empowered by the group. It's something that you can do for yourself. You don't need a group. You can do it for yourself as you confront those painful pieces of past or present, and really just envision them. This is God's embrace. This is God's love. This is God in every detail. And if you keep going there, it does lessen the pain. Christelle, did you want to add something?
I wanted to ask, and you may have just answered the question, but I was just curious, like I had in my mind what wrapping the pain up in, God's love would look like. However, what does it look like for you whenever you wrap something up?
So usually I have like one or two things like that in my life that I think about sometimes, and I process as God's love. And a lot of times my Envision is just, it's like an embrace. I like tell myself, this is God's embrace. This is God. Every painful detail, every detail that I would not choose, it's God's embrace. It's God's embrace. It's such a hug. And I really get into that space of really like, this is his hug, because he loves me. Absolutely. He loves every one of us. Absolutely. And everything is him. Nothing can we take away from him and say, no, that's not him. A person made a bad choice, or it was random, or it was an accident, or it was nature. No such thing. Every movement of a blade of grass, it's all him.
I kept wanting to like justify, like maybe this happened because of this reason, and trying to see. But I guess the exercise is probably just accepting it and not necessarily having to have a reason for it.
Yeah, in this place now, there is that space of thinking how this is good. But right now, we weren't doing that. We were just accepting it as him. Again, we were trying to envision those two axioms. It's only him, and he has absolute love for us. So we were just feeling it as this too is his love. Now, separately, sometimes our minds can speculate into like, well, why is this good for me? It's love, it's good. Why is this good? And you can like sometimes remind yourself of situations that seemed like setbacks and were really springboards. Like, oh, this seemed like a really bad situation, or like how many people out of something bad, something so good came that would never come otherwise. Very interesting. This is a Hasidic concept, and as someone that listens, I give daily little WhatsApps of Hasidic thought, and somebody was listening to it on Friday, and then like she couldn't believe it. Right after that, she's a real estate agent. She went onto some big real estate podcast, whatever. I don't know if it's a podcast, something like that. And she couldn't believe it. In this totally secular real estate business podcast, the interviewer was talking, I don't know why this was on a real estate thing, because it doesn't sound like real estate, but I didn't ask any questions, was talking with some incredibly successful young man who has this like chain of these like very high, I only know this from what she told me, so I could be mangling the details, but what I understood from her, very, very, very high level and very, very lucrative gyms of like private trainers for the stars. And the man was explaining, the owner, this young man, who's now obviously a quite wealthy young man, he was saying that he was obese his whole life. And when he was like in college, he like almost died from his obesity. And basically he decided he wanted to live, and he lost the weight and went into a lot of physical fitness and training. And then as he was doing it, all of his friends were like, wow, like, how do you do that? Oh, I'll help you. I'll help you. I'll help you. And then as he's doing it for more people, he's like, I can make a career out of this. And this man on this podcast, on this real estate podcast, is saying, the only reason I have this like, mega career today is because of what I went through, and that obesity and, dealing with that is what created this. So this woman that was listening, she was like, oh my gosh, first I just hear this on my little WhatsApp of, godly inspiration. And then I hear it on my real estate podcast, it's the same idea. So she left me a message. She WhatsApped me to tell me like, I listen to you and then I hear it on the real estate podcast. So definitely we as human beings can have a free license for anything that we can think that helps us see the hug. Like silver linings in what we've gone through, what we're going through, how that, like I said, that setback really helped me and really put things in perspective, and really, because of that, I did this, because of that, I made a significant change. I prioritized different things than before. I mean, we all have things like that. So we can definitely say, oh yeah, that was God's hug. That was God's embrace. That was God helping me. At the moment, it didn't feel like help, but boy, my life is a different life because of that, and it's a better life because of that. So those things we can think of, but then there are certain things we can't. So the foundation of everything should be, it's only God. Nothing's random. Nothing is just a freak of nature. Nothing is just happened. Nothing is just coincidence. It's everything is God in every minute detail, and God has absolute love for me. And that's how we should wrap all of those things. And then separately, if our brain says, well, I understand why, I think I understand why this happened, and I think I can see how this has been helpful, that how it has helped me in the future, I can more see. Why it happened is very much more speculative. But yeah, that helps too. That helps too. But I think this is more foundational, because this is for every situation. The ones we see and the ones we can never see, we still have that same perspective. And that perspective also gives room for understanding how much we don't understand. Like if you would just think, like simple little parable, you stand outside and you look at the moon, and someone shows you a picture of all these like craters and rocks, and you're like, no, that's not what the moon looks like. I see the moon in the sky. I know what it looks like. And they're like, you're really far from it. This is pictures up close. No, that's not what the moon looks like. Well, obviously we're many millions of miles away from the moon. We're far more distant from God's understanding, from God's wisdom, because his wisdom's infinite and our minds are so finite. So if I understand that my vision of the moon really isn't what it looks like, and I should trust those pictures more than my eyesight of it, I could extrapolate and understand that there's really no way I can understand God's thoughts. His wisdom's infinite. I'm a little piece of finite intelligence, and my little finite intelligence is not really going to grasp his infinity. And even in our own lives, we can somehow think like sometimes, we're going through a situation and then like it's solved, but in a way we would never imagine. And like sometimes I'm like just awed by God's, I don't know, creativity, like totally out of our boxes. Like, oh, I would never have scripted that. Anything I script, you never do, because my scripting is so like, what should I say? Just ordinary, very unimaginative, no sparkle to it. And God's is like, whoa, so his thoughts are not our thoughts. His wisdom is never going to be something we can fathom. And that's part of accepting, is it's always him, it's always love, and his wisdom, his thoughts, his understanding is beyond things we can grasp. So sometimes we get little pieces, like I see how that thing that I thought was bad really created good. Okay, that we can get. But deeper than that, a lot is very, very, very inexplicable. But it can be inexplicable, and we can be in joy. The joy is it all comes from him, and he's absolutely good. He's absolutely good. He has absolute love for me. So everything that's happening is in essence good. Sometimes it's openly perceived as good, like those 15 blessings we thought of before. And sometimes it's disguised, like what we were just thinking about now, wrapping it up with that gossamer of God's love. It's still in essence good. So why does God do this? Why does God, who is only good and absolutely good, why does he put himself in disguise, put himself in all that like unpleasant wrapping paper? So there's a story with a great spiritual Jewish leader called the Maggid of Mezrich, that once he saw his son, a young boy, crying. And he said to him, why are you crying? And the boy said, well, I mean, we would call it playing hide and seek. I don't know if he used that term. I don't know if they had that term in Europe. The boy said, I was hiding and my friends stopped looking for me. I was hiding. We were playing a game. I hide, they find. But I hid so well and they stopped looking for me. And that made the boy so sad that as he came out of his hiding place all alone, he was crying. And his father, this great spiritual leader, said, you know, God has the same complaint. God is the God who hides. That's what the verse says. And God hides, so we should look for him. So we should find him. But sometimes, instead of looking and finding, we get busy with other things. And then nobody's looking for God. Then the game fizzled out. It didn't achieve its point and purpose. So sometimes when something happens and we feel so broken, we're broken because we forgot that it's God and God's within that, but he's hiding. And the purpose is for me to be motivated to find him. So if I think that way and I recognize that the purpose is for me to find him, I'm not going to be broken. I'm going to be looking. You know, if we think of, you know, one of the classical examples, of course, is the binding of Isaac. So what happened there? By the binding of Isaac, there was a deliberate setup by God. God deliberately told Abraham one thing, knowing Abraham would misunderstand it. That was part of the plot, for Abraham to misunderstand it. And later at the end of the story, when Abraham says, God, do you want to just tell me what's going on? God says, I didn't change. I told you bring him up. You brought him up. Now I'm telling you bring him down. I never told you to slaughter him. You misconstrued it and you thought that when I said bring him up as an offering, that meant he was supposed to die. I mean, I wanted you to misconstrue it, but that was a misconstruing. I never said that. I never meant it. I never wanted him dead. But I wanted you to misunderstand. Why did God want Abraham to misunderstand? Because then he was walking a certain walk that you can only walk if you have that misunderstanding. So Abraham misunderstood God's deliberate design to create a situation that would bring Abraham to a certain point that only a situation like that could bring him to. So when a father hides, he's hiding to, say, develop the intelligence of the child, that the child will be wise enough to find his hiding place. A foolish child just gets distracted. Maybe he cries, maybe he forgets, starts playing with a different toy, forgets about his father. The more mature child realizes father's hiding for me to find him, and he's going to find him. The father's not hiding to stay away. The father's hiding to be found. The father wants the child to find him. So that's, of course, a parable. And in real life terms, so we have situations in life that seem, we'll call them bad. We would process them as bad, negative, unpleasant, painful, not what we want. That's God's hiding. Because why am I calling it God hiding? Because God's all good. So if I see him, I only process it as good, as blessed, as miraculous, as kindness, as love. So when I'm not thinking of those terms, blessed, miraculous, kind, love, and I'm thinking of painful, disturbing, difficult, God's incognito, because he's not that. But that's how I'm processing my life, and it's all him. So God is there in hiding. And how do I find him? By trusting, by being joyous, by adding and serving God, by the ways that bring me closer to God through this process. Just as I was saying, alluding to Abraham, that Abraham reached a pinnacle of service of God when he thought God wanted him to sacrifice his son, and he woke up early in the morning because he was so full of joy to serve God and do this command that rejected and negated everything the past 137 years of his life was based on. But this is God. If that's what he wants, that's what I want to do. So that was pulling out of him such a purity of service that only a situation like that could pull out of him. So we're not challenged in that way, but we also don't have his strength, so it's fair. He was challenged as per his strength, we're challenged as per ours. But whatever our challenges are, again, if I process something as bad, as negative, as painful, God's hiding, because if he's on the surface, I wouldn't process any of those things. How do I uncover the surface? By saying, I know it's you. I trust you. I'm still happy. This isn't going to throw me. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to get closer to you. I'm going to serve you better. I'm going to take my commandments and do them better than ever before, because I know that's the reason for this process. So God is hiding himself for us to search for him. So joy, we're talking about joy. Joy is not only expressing the truth of the situation, that it's all God, that it's all good. The joy is also allowing God to throw away the disguise, that the good be openly revealed. So the joy is doing two things. So again, we were saying joy. And why do I always have joy? Whatever's going on in my life, because I have a very, very blessed life. And I recount my blessings again and again and again to remind myself of what an amazing, blessed life I have. And when I'm looking at those other pieces in my life, I'm saying, it's all God. And he loves me. It's his embrace, it's his hug, it's his love. So when I'm dealing with such a situation, I look at it with confidence and I say, this is you, God, because it's only you. There's nothing but you. And I know you love me. I'm not letting this throw me. I know it's a test. I'm not failing. I see the cop. I'm coming to a complete stop. I'm not failing this test, God. I love you. I know you love me. I know this is your good. So my joy is one, expressing that I'm in tune with the reality of the situation. It's only God and it's only good. My joy is at the same time concluding that piece of what was supposed to be achieved. Because by my joy, I found him. And finding him means he comes out of hiding. So therefore, the negativity of the situation should drop away because it achieved its purpose. Once it achieves its purpose, we moved on. God doesn't want us to be in a situation that on the surface is negative. There was a goal. The goal was achieved. Now we don't need that anymore. Just again, thinking in the metaphor, in the parable, when the child finds the father doesn't say, oh, now I'm hiding again. No, you found me. That was, we achieved the goal. We got the victory. The mission was accomplished. So God's hiding for me to find him. When we're in joy, we found him. So God doesn't need to hide anymore. Does anyone here ever experience that? That when they accepted, when they rejoiced, when they recognized, this is God. I'm not being fooled. This is God. So God left his hiding spot, which means that the negative situation was resolved. Has anyone here ever experienced something like that? That they were going through something challenging, and when they realized it's God and accepted it as God, then the negativity stopped.
I think I have a small example. My husband ended up having to go on a trip, and my son and I went with him, and we got there, and we were supposed to be there for 2 days, and the conference that my husband was supposed to go to was canceled, and it was just like the whole trip had like changed so many times, and a family member was supposed to meet us at one point, and they weren't able to, and it's just like I just knew that God was working stuff out, and it was just so easy to accept and not to try to like push or try to make anything happen, because that was like, I just know that Hashem is going to work this out however it needs to work out. And it ended up that me and my husband and my son had a whole day together where we were just able to play and enjoy each other because his conference was canceled. And then we drove home, and we drove home a day early, and it was like really bad weather the day that we were supposed to drive home. And it's like we just had the best time, and missed having to drive in stressful weather, and it just ended up being really good. And it was just even better because like the whole way through I was just like, oh, I know this is God and this is good, and and it was just all good. I mean, and it was really cool to see it from that perspective and to understand it as it was happening.
That's so nice. That is so nice. That is so nice that you have that experience. So when you have those experiences, you hold them close to your heart. And then if you have another challenge, you just remind yourself, hey, this is just like that one, like no different, just different details, different window dressing. It's the same issue. And we're just going to pass it again, even more beautifully. Anyone else had such an experience? You know what Christelle's saying about the bad weather is reminding me many years ago. At that point, I didn't own a car. I mean, I was driving since I was a teenager, but I didn't own a car, so I'm not really, driving on a regular basis. So I was a comfortable driver. And my family was going to Baltimore, I think, for a holiday. And I was like, or New York, I don't remember. And I was like, and I was, the tickets, I had so much money already with, thank God, a number of children. We'll drive. It's not a big deal. I'll rent a car. We don't own a car. It's not a big deal. I'll rent one. And then I'll rent. And, this was the first time always every year we flew for these, visits on the holidays to my family. I don't know, it was a long time ago. I don't know, New York, Baltimore. But we'll rent and we'll drive. And what's the big deal? I can drive. My husband didn't drive at that time, but I could drive. And what's the big deal? And I built it up exciting with the kids. And we're going to go on this road trip. But my children were all very young at the time. It's going to be so exciting. And I bought lots of food for the trip. It's going to be very exciting. And then, I reserved a car to rent. And the night before we were supposed to drive, as I was learning a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I opened up to a letter, and the letter was saying basically something like, don't drive, fly. And I was like, is the Rebbe like giving me unsolicited advice? I didn't ask. I wasn't even a question in my mind. Like, why would I spend so much money on all these plane tickets? We'll just drive. I wasn't even a question, but I was like really very relevant to our situation. So my husband was already sleeping at the time. I'd sort of left him a note like, look at this letter. Do you think the Rebbe is saying we're supposed to fly? So he saw that, he wasn't sure. So he actually wrote in a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he also got a very strong answer about don't drive. And I was like, okay, we're not going to drive. And so we got plane tickets last minute, and I said, God, this is on you. It's not my money. It's your money. I'm trusting you. I'm not worrying about it one drop. And we flew there, we flew back. And I'm just remember what Christelle was saying, when we flew back, the return trip was horrific, torrential weather, horrible weather in this whole Chicago area. And, obviously, and as we were flying back, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I was supposed to be driving in this. And thinking, okay, I'm so grateful that, I got, I was told don't drive, because it would have been very, very, very stressful. I wasn't, it wasn't my car, and I wasn't driving every day in those days. So it would have been quite stressful. And I was like, okay, I just felt very protected and taken care of, that we didn't drive and we flew. So yes, God has his ways of helping us, and we just have to look at it that way and understand that's a help. Anyone else has experienced something? My story was really sort of random. It wasn't exactly the point. I was just piggybacking off Christelle's bad weather non-experience. I remember my own bad weather non-experience. That someone else had something in their life where they accepted it as God. It wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't what they were hoping for, but they accepted it as God. And then as they accepted it as such, God came out of the hiding. Sometimes it's hard on the moment to like come up with ideas. Christelle did fabulous. Sometimes it's hard, but like have that question like in the back of your brain, because yes, so to stay in that mind frame, it's good to like in the back of your brain, like think, if you remember something, you could post it on the WhatsApp group if you're on our WhatsApp group. There are a lot of experiences like that. We all hopefully have had them, because of course to have them, you do need, as Christelle beautifully did, to just say, God, this is you. My plans are meaningless. God, this is you. And again, it could be in very small things. It's not always overt, you know, life-shattering miracles, life transformative situations. It could be in small things and in big things. Like sometimes we're very focused on the big things, and the big things we know is God, and we know it's good, and we know it's God, and we know it's good. And then the small details drive us crazy. And those small details are equally God and equally good. And we're talking about trust. And maybe I shared with you, I don't remember, I think I did. We're sharing with you how on Passover, one year, we don't buy anything once Passover starts for the duration of the holiday. So we have to have everything stocked up in advance. It's only 8 days, but somehow there's a lot of food, there's a lot of cooking, you go through a lot. And I'm cooking for a lot of people. And I mean, one year, as very often happens, it seemed like I was going to run out of oil. And I use a lot of oil on Passover. And I was like, oh my God. And my daughter, who now is 21, she's probably about 14 at the time. And she said to me, Ma, you trust God for everything else. Just trust him, there'll be enough oil. And I'm like, you know, you're so right. And I did, and there was. And I think I've shared the story. I think I shared the story when we're discussing trust, but the reason I'm bringing it in here is, why did I naturally think about trusting God for the oil? That's such a small thing. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's not enough oil, like we would all survive. There was plenty of food. Trust me, there would always be plenty of food. It's not going to make or break anything ultimately. It wouldn't be something I'd remember 3 months later. You know, it would be a beautiful holiday with or without the oil. So therefore, I forgot to like trust God for the oil the same way I trust God for the big things in my life. But we can and we should for everything. So there's big things that are more painful, and we know we need to deal with, and we know we need to wrap up with God's love and God's embrace and God's hugs. And also in the little things like the conference that didn't work out, or the this or the that. Same God, same love. He's there in the big, he's there in all the details. All right, so we will stop at this point.
I got one thing real quick. It happens a lot, but to have to trust God, but I'm chronically late. Poor Jack, I was always late. I don't care how hard I try, I'm chronically late. And I'm still chronically late without Jack. And I think, how can this be possible? I don't have, well, I'm worse because he always got stuff ready, and because he knew I was always going to be late. Well, now I don't have him, and I'm really late. And I don't care what time. I can try to leave the house at 8 for a 9 o'clock appointment. And if I get out by 8:15, I'm lucky. It's like, why? And so I just take off. And finally, I've just given it to God. I said, fine. I said, you know that I try to be on time. And you know that I've never been late.
Really? Really?
No, I'm still on time.
Oh, wow.
And it's totally a miracle because I live a long way from town. I'm 30 miles from town. And I mean, of course, I do drive a little too fast to make up the time. But luckily, there's no cops on the road. The road's clear and we can go fast. But God is good to me, even though I'm chronically late.
Wow. Wow. Great example. Great example. It's all you, God. And I'm leaving it to your hands. The time I arrive is the time you want. Nothing.
I said, you know what time my appointment is? I gotta be there. That's all I
Wow.
can do. It's all him. It's up to him.
Wow.
I just tell him, it's up to you, God. We gotta make it on time. If
God,
not,
you
it's
gotta do
still
your
up.
part because I'm not so good at this.
And I just tell him, and if I don't make it on time, then it was you that I didn't make it on time. So it's okay.
I honestly tell God the same thing because I also have that issue. And I also am like, because I see that I could be so organized and in theory I should be on time and I'm not, or sometimes in theory I should be late and I'm on time.
I know, isn't that crazy?
It's God. So I like stop. I do my part. I'm not trying to be irresponsible. I do my part responsibly. And like everything else, I leave success and failure to him. So coming on time or coming late, it's his call.
Amen. Very good class. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So everyone, please take it, keep it in your front pocket, use it over the week, try to really apply it, try to think some of the thoughts and exercises, and God willing, we should really be able to all walk around with the joy of being so secure in how blessed our life is, and anything that might not seem a blessing, to be so secure that this is actually also part of God's love. All right, we should have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. You too.
Oh.
Shavua tov.